All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are cracking the code on motivation. We're going to take a look at these powerful and, well, often invisible psychological forces that are pulling the strings behind why you choose to do what you do. So let's dive in. I mean, think about this for a second. Has this ever happened to you? You might be amazing at something, like a total natural, but you just can't bring yourself to do it. And at the same time, you'll happily pour hours and hours into something else that you find really, really hard. You know, this isn't just a random quirk. It's a genuine puzzle of human motivation, and it turns out there's a science to figuring it out. So our story here actually begins with a real-world mystery, a problem that was seriously bugging researchers and educators way back in the 1970s. This was the big question. Society was looking at this huge pool of talent, and it seemed like they were just walking away from STEM fields. And here's the thing, it wasn't about ability. Girls were getting great grades. So, what was really going on? Well, a psychologist named Jacqueline Eccles decided she was going to find out. And that decision kicked off what would become a 40-year investigation into the very nature of our choices. Now, to solve this mystery, Eccles and her team came up with a new way of looking at things, a new blueprint for motivation called the Expectancy-Value theory. It all boils down to two simple but really powerful questions. The first one is expectation, which is basically, can I do this? And the second one is value, which is, do I want to do this? To get to the bottom of that STEM puzzle, they had to really unpack that second question. What actually makes something valuable to us? And this slide really shows you the huge shift in thinking. The old way of looking at motivation was, well, kind of basic. It said the harder something is, the more valuable it is to succeed. But Eccles argued that this was just way too simple, especially when trying to explain the choices women were making. She proposed that value isn't some neat little math equation. No, it's personal, it's messy, it's complex, and it's made up of a bunch of different parts. And here they are. This chart lays out all the pieces of the puzzle. Eccles said that whenever we're sizing up a task, our brain is mixing together these four key ingredients. Now, the recipe might be different for every single person and for every single task, but they all play a part in the final decision we make. This is the absolute core of the blueprint, so let's break each one down. First up, we've got intrinsic value. This one's the easiest to get, right? It's just the pure joy you get from doing something. It's that feeling when you're lost in a good book, or you're playing a sport you love, or you spend hours on a hobby just because it's fun. Next is utility value. Okay, so this is the practical, strategic part of your brain kicking in. It's asking, hey, is this actually going to be useful for me down the road? You might not love that difficult stats class, but if you know it's an absolute must-have for that data science career you're dreaming of, then that class has super high utility value. Then there's attainment value, and this one is all about identity. It's about how important it is for you to succeed at something because it proves who you are. So if you see yourself as a creative person, finishing a really tough painting has high attainment value. It's not just about the painting itself. It's about reinforcing that core belief. Yep, this is who I am. And finally, and this one is so important, there's cost. See, motivation isn't just about all the good stuff. It's always a trade-off. What does this task demand from you? And I'm not just talking about time and effort. Think about the emotional drain, the stress, and maybe the biggest one of all, the opportunity cost. Every single hour you spend doing this is an hour you can't spend doing something else you value. Okay, so with this new 4-part blueprint for value, researchers could finally get out there and start testing the whole theory in the real world. So let's take a look at what the data started to show. And the results were pretty mind-blowing. The studies found this really clear distinction. A student's expectancy, their answer to, can I do this? That was the best predictor of their actual grades, their performance. But their value score, that personal mix of enjoyment, usefulness, identity, and cost, that was the best predictor of the choices they made, like which classes they signed up for next year. It perfectly separates can I do it from do I want to do it? But while they were proving their theory right, the researchers stumbled onto a whole new mystery. As they followed these students over time, they saw this sharp, really consistent drop in motivation, especially in math, right as kids were moving into junior high. What on earth was going on? They found the answer wasn't in the students, but in the schools. See, young teenagers are just starting to need more independence, more supportive relationships. But the junior high environment back then was doing the exact opposite. It was becoming more controlling, the teaching was less personal, and it was cranking up the competition and social comparison. It was basically the perfect recipe for crushing motivation. So the bottom line here is, it wasn't the kids, it was the world around them. This finding was so powerful, it actually had a direct hand in changing education policy in the US. It helped lead to the creation of the modern middle school model, which is designed to be a much better fit for how young teens' brains work. But the theory didn't just stop there. Like any good scientific idea, it kept growing and changing over the next few decades. And that led to a major revolution in how we think about the whole thing. For a really long time, researchers got so focused on the three positive parts of value, the enjoyment, the usefulness, the identity, that one absolutely key piece of the original theory just kind of got left behind. And that forgotten piece was cost. It took a while, but researchers rediscovered that you simply cannot understand choice if you don't understand the trade-offs. The cost of something, in effort, in stress, in other things you could be doing, was this huge piece of the puzzle that was finally getting the spotlight it always deserved. So this deeper understanding of cost, and some other factors too, led to a pretty major update. After almost 40 years of being incredibly successful, the theory got a new name in 2020. So you have to ask, right? After 4 decades, why the change? Why go and add this word situated? It might sound like a small tweak, but it actually represents a giant leap in our understanding. The name change puts all the emphasis on this idea that our motivation is not some fixed personality trait that we carry around. Instead, it's constantly being shaped by our immediate situation, our culture, the classroom we're in, the people around us, the specific choices we have right now. In other words, motivation is alive, and it's tied directly to our context. So what does this all mean for you and me? Let's boil down more than 40 years of incredible research into one clear, practical takeaway. Here's the bottom line. Every time you make a choice, your brain is running this super fast, usually unconscious calculation. First, expectancy. Can I pull this off? And second, value. Is this thing actually worth it to me? And that value calculation is weighing the fun, the future payoff, and the identity boost, all against the total cost. The decision you make in the end, to go for that job, to take that class, to skip that workout, it all comes from how your brain balances those forces. And that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. As you're facing your next big decision, try to run this calculation on purpose. What are the hidden costs you maybe haven't even thought about? And what are the true values, the real enjoyment, usefulness, and identity that are pushing you forward? Because understanding those is the first step to making a choice you can truly own.